week. Okay, guys, 5.7, quadratic formula. So, quadratic formula starts in standard form. We have ax squared plus bx plus c, and this differs from completing the square because we want the whole thing equal to 0. So quadratic formula won't work unless the whole thing is equal to 0. Okay, so it's a little bit different than completing the square. Now, quadratic formula you must have memorized. I'm not going to give it to you. I'm not going to post it for you. I'm not going to tell you what it is. So if you come up to me on the test and say, I don't know the quadratic formula, I'm going to say, think really, really hard. Okay? Because I cannot give it to you. You should have this memorized because you did do it in Algebra 1. So we have x equals negative b, or the opposite of b, plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a.
Our negative thing song.
Okay. Why do I have to sing the song?
Because we can't remember.
Okay. So here's the song. In case you didn't know, you can do it to Jingle Bells, I Do Pop Goes the Weasel, or I guess you can do Row, Row, Row Your Boat. I Do Pop Goes the Weasel. So here's it. One time only. X equals minus b plus or minus radical b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. Thank you. Okay. All right. So one tip that we have is we use quadratic formula or completing the square to solve quadratic equations that are not factorable, meaning you can't use diamond method, there's not a GCF to pull out, or you can't use bottoms up. So those were our three main it's not a difference of two squares. So of all of our factoring methods, you can't use any of them. It is not factorable. So then you would use either completing the square or quadratic formula. Completing the square quadratic formula will give you the same answer because quadratic formula comes from completing the square. Okay, so we get quadratic formula by taking this guy right here, the standard form, and completing the square. That's where quadratic formula comes from.
So could you use this for like every one of them, even if diamond works?
Yeah, good question. So you will get the same answer regardless. So even if you can factor it and diamond method works, which actually example 1 you can use quadratic formula and you will still get the same answer. So you could go to quadratic formula every single time. It's just that diamond method is a little bit faster if you can do it. So quadratic formula, completing the square, are mostly for when we can't factor. Remember that the equation must be equal to 0 to use quadratic formula. You will get the same answer whether you complete the square or whether you use quadratic formula. However, on the test, there are 2 free response questions. One asks you to complete the square. One asks you to use quadratic formula. If you do not follow instructions and use the method that the test tells you to, you don't get any credit at all, even if you get the right answer. Okay, so you have to be able to use both of them. Alright? Otherwise, if they don't specify, you can use whichever one you want. Okay? I don't care which one you use, whatever you're comfortable with. There are 2 questions where they specifically tell you completing the square and quadratic formula. So those are the only 2 where you can't choose. Got it? Quadratic formula is equal to 0. Completing the square is when we're filling in the blanks. Okay? So let's use example 1. We have x squared plus 12x plus 32 equals 0. The whole thing's already equal to 0, so we're good. This one actually is factorable. We could use diamond method on this. What are 2 numbers that multiply to 32 and add to 12? 8 and 4. So that would give us x plus 8 times x plus 4 equals 0. And then what would my answer be? Negative 8 and negative 4. So let's use quadratic formula and see if we get the same thing. Okay? So quadratic formula is x equals negative b. What is b? 12. Remember, if b is already negative, we have negative a negative, so that's going to make it positive. So this sign stays there all the time. You just plug in whatever b is. Plus or minus. Make a big square root B squared, so 12 squared, minus 4 times A. What's A, guys? 1. What's C? 32. All of that is over 2 times 1.
Oh, yeah.
A. Okay, so now this should be the first step every time you use quadratic formula. I want to see you plugging everything in. After that, I always simplify inside the radical first. So that is going to be x equals negative 12 plus or minus. 12 squared gives me 144. And negative 4 times 32 gives me negative 128. You may use a calculator. However, I still need to see every single step. So please do not write this down and then give me an answer because you plugged it all into the calculator. I want to see that you know what 12 squared is, that you could get this one, and that we are dividing by 2 times 1, which is 2. So I still need to see every single step. Okay, that gives me x equals plus or minus square root. 144 minus 128 is 16, all over 2.
Yeah, what was 12?
Oh, 12. Oh my gosh, thank you. Negative 12 plus or minus. Whoa.
Wouldn't you divide that by 2?
No, because this is plus or minus. So we have to keep it all together first.
That's 12.
The 12 divided by 2? We can't do that because it's all together. If it was separated, we could. But right now we're keeping it all together. So that's x equals negative 12 plus or minus, what's the square root of 16? 4 over 2. So the boys asked a really good question. They said, could we reduce negative 12 and 2? The answer is no, because negative 12 is attached to that square root by a plus or a minus. So we would have to either reduce the whole thing or we can't reduce any of it. Okay? So my suggestion is that you get it as far as you can and then see if everything reduces. So see now how I have negative 12 and 4? I could reduce everything by 2. But it's actually going to be a little bit easier if we just keep going. So that's going to be negative 12. We have two answers here. Negative 12 plus 4, which is negative 8 over 2. And negative 12 minus 4, which is negative 16 over 2. So I split up, this is plus or minus, so negative 12 plus 4 over 2, and negative 12 minus 4 over 2. So we got two answers. So x equals negative 4 and negative 8. So we got the same answers as if we did diamond method. So you will get the same answer every time.
You have to show both of them.
Okay? Of course you don't have to show both of them.
You don't?
Pick a method. Okay, example 2. We have 7x minus 5x squared, that's a 5x squared, minus 4 equals 2x plus 3. We want the whole thing equal to 0, so what do I have to do? Subtract 2x and subtract 3. So that's going to give me 5x minus 5x squared minus 7 equals 0. Now, is everything in the order that we want it? No. So let's change the order to negative 5x squared plus 5x minus 7 equals 0. Okay, so all I did was reorder it so the x squared was in front. But that sign has to travel with it.
What the heck?
Okay?
Alright. I'm lost.
Okay, so now let's do quadratic formula because the only other method we could use here is bottoms up, and I'll tell you right now, bottoms up won't work. Okay? So we have x equals negative b. What's b? 5. Plus or minus square root. Make it nice and long. B squared. So 5 squared minus 4a. What's a? Negative 5. Good. What's c? Negative 7. All over 2a. So all over 2 times negative 5. that's x equals minus b, or negative 5, plus or minus square root. 5 squared gives me 25. Negative 4 times negative 5 gives me positive 20 times negative 7, negative 140. All over negative 10. Please do not start reducing stuff yet. So that's x equals negative 5 plus or minus square root. 25 minus 140 gives me negative 115. Now before, all over negative 10. Before, this would have not been allowed, right? We would have stopped. What can I do now? Take out the I. Is there anything else we can take out?
I have a question.
Okay, so that's negative 5 plus or minus I root 115, because there's no perfect squares inside 115, all over negative 10. Okay. Now the reason why you cannot start simplifying stuff here. So leave this written down. Don't put your notes away yet. I'm going to show you something. Negative 5 plus or minus I root 115 all over negative 10. A lot of you are going to try to do this. That's 1, that's 2, so my answer is 1 plus or minus I root 115 all over 2. That's not allowed because you only simplified part of it. Because really, what is this? If we were to separate it, it would be I root 115 all over negative 10. This one does simplify to 1/2. Does this one simplify at all? So it would still be plus or minus I root 115 over negative 10. Okay, so you cannot just simplify part. You either have to simplify the whole thing or none of it. The one thing we can simplify here, not the I, is the negative. Because take a look. We have negative 5 over negative 10. A negative over negative is a positive. And then let's look at this. This is a plus or minus. So, this little part right here would be I root 115 over negative 10. And negative I root 115 over negative 10. This one would stay negative, and that one turns into a positive. So we still have a, So we still have a positive and a negative in there. Does that make sense? So plus and minus covers all situations. So what we can do is we can simplify the negatives here to make 5 plus or minus I root 115 all over positive 10. So we can simplify the negatives only because, since this is a plus or minus, it covers all our bases. So it covers the positives, it covers the negatives. If we divide by negative, we still have a positive and a negative, so we're good to go. Does that make sense? Okay, I think that's enough on quadratic formula, yeah? It's the same thing over and over, so as long as you know how to plug it in, you should be good.